NASA says now is the ideal time to focus on the planet Venus. This follows the new revelation of conceivable life on the world. If you were to examine the records of NASA from the 1960s, the space organization's call would be evident: Venus. A planet once seen as punishment, Venus was overlooked while Mars became our target. With such cautious naming in mind, one of the deepest planets wasn't considered, at least, not in the same way. During the ferocious space race, it happened. The Soviet Union concentrated on sending expensive missions to Venus. The terrible planet displayed virtually no possibilities for life. Yet the Soviet space program did not retire the Venera program until the fall of the empire. Thanks to Neil deGrasse Tyson, we finally understand why. Join us for an analysis of the Venus photographs that were declassified, taken by the Soviet Union before its fall. The Soviet Union was active in more ways than one. In addition to changing the international course of the world, the fall of the empire sank a number of mysteries with it. The Soviets had a profound partiality for secrets, from running the most exceptional intelligence offices in the world to keeping potential extraterrestrial contact under wraps. A number of secrets from this earlier superpower remain. In all honesty, before the US dominated the majority of planetary endeavors in outer space, the Soviet Union was leading the game. While the empire had a long history of unsuccessful and fruitless missions in space, its greatest obsession was with the internal, horrendous planet, Venus. In Russian, Venus is known as Venera, hence the name of the mission that took place between 1961 and 1983. Simultaneously, the United States focused on sending its missions to the moon. So, in an intelligent move, the Soviets chose to utilize their assets elsewhere. We can't say the entire focus on this strange, second planet from our sun was accidental. Were the Soviets aiming to use the planet's surface as a practical and outstanding military installation? Or were they perhaps considering colonization, immediately following the search for any signs of life? It's very hard to explain why the empire was so focused on such a dreadful planet. Ever since the Soviets appointed these investigative journeys, they were not exactly forthcoming with their points and goals. Everything we know about the Venusian missions is based on declassified and unarchived proof. Even then, it's difficult to pinpoint what the Soviets were looking for, or whether they uncovered the secrets of Venus. The Soviets didn't land on Venus once, twice, or even 3 times. In fact, the Soviets launched 28 expensive rockets to the shocking planet. 13 of those entered the Venusian atmosphere, and 8 successfully landed. These complex missions placed the Soviets in a leading position in space exploration. Sure, the United States was a close second, but NASA was more intrigued by satellites and novel setups rather than researching life on other planets. Its warmth for Mars followed that. Your history textbook may not tell you this, but the Soviet space program was the first organization to send a probe into the atmosphere of a planet other than Earth. It had other firsts on its resume, too. The USSR became the first state to accomplish a smooth landing on a different planet. It was also the first to return images and sounds from the surface of another planet. That's right, the Soviets had their own one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind moment, well before the US. So why do we seldom hear about such milestone missions? Keep in mind what we said about the Soviet tendency to keep secrets. That's just one of the many reasons for the oversight. In 1992, after the fall of the USSR, the famous space organization was decommissioned. It had to be revived under a new Russian identity, Roscosmos. Much of its historical information was either lost or destroyed. Because of this, we do not have a clear explanation for why the Soviets launched 28 spacecraft into the Venusian environment. But if we had to make the most legitimate estimate, maybe the Soviet choice to investigate Venus was about reducing costs more than anything else. This isn't to say that the space program had no hope for the livability of the planet. They were searching for economic water presence, power of solar radiation, and the general characteristics of the planet. Without a series of these space missions, it would have been nearly impossible to measure Venus's high temperatures and thick atmosphere. A lot of cosmologists don't believe the planet could sustain life. The temperatures are high enough to melt lead, and water is scarce. Additionally, because of its thick atmosphere, the pressure on Venus is many times greater than Earth's. However, these are very recent realizations. To disregard the USSR's contribution to Venus exploration is comparable to editing history. As far as the Soviets were concerned, Venus was worth investigating, even if only to ignite the space race. More livable planets like Mars weren't off the table, but they were more expensive. Everything involving sending probes to Venus came down to distance. On average, the ghastly planet is only 40 million kilometers from Earth, while Mars is typically 250 million kilometers away. Such significant distance differences lead to radical differences in cost. Also, the US, despite being the largest economy in the world, still found it difficult to investigate Mars. Different reports suggest Soviet missions were unreliable and had significant technical gaps. Their spacecraft weren't suited to cover cosmic distances. Additionally, the agency had a poor track record of losing contact with its rockets. That's likely why the Soviet program opted for a shorter, closer journey that would yield results. However, if we disregard the space race for a moment, the story of the Venera missions would be incomplete. Even before the United States was on the space map, the Soviet program launched the first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1, in 1957. This move intensified the space tussle and maintained Soviet dominance. What's truly fascinating is why the US focused on the Moon, except for the unknown reasons surrounding NASA's repeated failures with Venus missions during the 1960s. The US Space Agency found itself in a gridlock known as the Venus Curse. Each time they conducted a mission in the Venusian setting, it went horribly wrong. This is precisely when the Soviet Union recognized an opportunity to profit from NASA's failures. At the time, both nations were determined to win. The most logical plan was to pursue two different options. It was a quiet understanding. Decisively, the Soviet program seized Earth's sister planet as the greatest milestone in the space tussle, achieving what its partner had failed to complete. Despite limited resources and political stumbles, it repeatedly sent missions to Venus to maintain its lead over the US. In contrast to NASA's focus on the Moon, this key division wasn't without antagonism and misleading publicity. To conceal their failures with Venus, the American agency maligned the USSR's obsession with the planet in popular media. Venus was dubbed the Hellish planet, while Mars became man's destiny. These labels didn't matter to the Soviets. Their mission was to exemplify superiority over the Americans, and they were not unsuccessful. The Venera missions achieved this, though they are nearly forgotten in modern history. Those missions were extremely difficult, advanced, and ambitious. Despite the program's gradual progress, the achievements of the Venera missions cannot be understated. These missions demonstrated not just the technical prowess of the Soviet Union, but also its unwavering determination to dominate space exploration, especially in uncharted and hostile environments like Venus. After Venera 3, subsequent missions brought even greater breakthroughs. Venera 4, launched in 1967, became the first spacecraft to return data from another planet's atmosphere. Venera 7, launched in 1970, made history by becoming the first spacecraft to successfully transmit data back to Earth from the surface of another planet, surviving Venus's extreme heat and pressure for 23 minutes. Each new Venera mission improved on the last. Venera 9 sent back the first black and white photographs of the Venusian surface. The image showed a rocky terrain under a thick, yellowish sky, confirmation that Venus was indeed a hellish world, unlike anything on Earth. Venera 13, launched in 1981, returned colored images and conducted soil analysis, giving scientists unprecedented insights into the planet's composition. These accomplishments laid the foundation for our understanding of Venus. Without them, we would have remained in the dark about the planet's crushing atmospheric pressure, sulfuric acid clouds, and scorching temperatures. Ironically, it was this hostile environment that caused the eventual decline of Venus-focused missions. As the data revealed a world less hospitable than hoped, interest began to fade. The United States continued to focus on Mars and the Moon, while the Soviet Union, now facing its own internal collapse, could no longer fund its ambitious space programs. By the early 1990s, the Venera program came to a quiet end. But its legacy remains. Today, as we re-examine Venus in the light of new evidence, such as the possible detection of phosphine gas in its atmosphere, scientists are once again intrigued. Phosphine is a potential biosignature gas, and its presence could suggest microbial life in the planet's upper atmosphere, where conditions are less extreme. This renewed curiosity has led to proposals for new missions. NASA has approved two upcoming missions to Venus, Da Vinci Plus and Veritas. These will study the planet's atmosphere, geology, and history, attempting to answer whether Venus might have once been habitable, and whether it could still harbor life in some form today. Yet, as we prepare to revisit our mysterious planetary neighbor, we must acknowledge the pioneering work of the Soviets. Their efforts not only unveiled the surface of Venus to human eyes for the first time but also proved that reaching, and studying, a planet so hostile was even possible. In a way, the Soviets were exploring for all of humanity. Their legacy lives on in the data, images, and inspiration they provided. paving the way for a future in which Venus might once again become a target for exploration, discovery, and perhaps one day, even visitation. The Soviet Union was successful in sending probes into the Venusian environment. The most important problem with this approach was that it had limited design potential. The Soviets quickly revised their plans and introduced the most recent rockets of the Venera program in the 1970s. Their capacity for highlighting technological improvements allowed them to conduct the first dual missions. With the introduction of Venera 4 and Venera 5, the majority of historians agree that this was the most fascinating decade in the history of space exploration. The US also attempted to come up with similar plans for launch. So why did the Soviet agency opt for dual missions to Venus? To comprehend this, you must acknowledge that advanced technology is required for space travel, equipment for gathering the highest level of evidence and data. Clearly, the first spacecraft was launched to look around the surface of the planet. Exactly what transpired with Venera 4? The launch was successful, and the spacecraft entered the Venusian atmosphere. The Soviet program effectively continued with Venera 5. It wasn't just another instance of experimentation. The second spacecraft's launch was designed specifically to collect one-of-a-kind data about the planet. In other words, the Soviets aimed to break through barriers of temperature, atmospheric pressure, and radiation on Venus. They were not required to wait long for their responses. By the mid-70s, the Soviet program was entering the most advanced phase of the Venera missions. Everything the USSR had done up to that point was about research and development. It was about ensuring that their technologies and designs were optimized. It was also about perfecting the methods and mechanics of interplanetary travel. However, for the second decade of Venera missions, the Soviet Union aimed to conduct the most successful exploratory missions. The most fascinating launch of this period was Venera 7. As the 11th Soviet probe, when it entered Venus' atmosphere, it became the first spacecraft to send information from another planet. The high planet densities, temperatures, and surface pressures were already noted. At this point, the Soviets wanted to record Venusian sounds. The next major achievement in the program came with Venera 13, which had surpassed all previous explorations of other planets in terms of complexity by the mid-1980s. This spacecraft was the first to take color panoramic photographs of Venus's surface. At the same time, the Soviet program launched Venera 14 to gather similar data about the planet's surface. As the Soviet Union was among the first nations to discover and recognize Venus, the Russian Space Agency has renewed its ambitions for Venus missions. Venera D is a planned collaboration between Roscosmos and NASA to investigate the atmosphere and surface of Venus. The abbreviation Venera D stands for Venera Dolgo Zavushchaya in Russian, meaning long-lasting Venera. It is expected that the mission will launch in the late 2020s or mid-2030s and aims to study the planet's atmosphere, geological history, and search for signs of any ongoing or past habitability. The spacecraft will include an orbiter, a lander, and possibly an inflatable platform to investigate the planet's environment in detail. The legacy of the Venera missions extends far beyond their technological achievements and international implications. These missions, which the Soviet Union started during the height of the Cold War, represented a pinnacle of human creativity and determination in exploring the universe. Despite facing numerous challenges and difficulties, the Soviets did not give up in their effort to uncover the mysteries of Venus, a planet long regarded as hostile and unfriendly to life. One of the most essential features of the Venera missions was their pioneering use of mechanical probes to investigate the climates and surfaces of other planets. These missions paved the way for future exploration beyond Earth's neighborhood and laid the groundwork for our understanding of planetary science. The data collected by the Venera spacecraft provided valuable insights into the environment of Venus, including its scorching temperatures, crushing atmospheric pressure, and toxic atmosphere dominated by carbon dioxide. Additionally, the technological advancements made possible by the Venera program had broader repercussions for space exploration in general. The development of durable heat-resistant materials, robust communication systems, and effective landing methods were crucial accomplishments that contributed to subsequent missions to other planets, like Mars and beyond. The lessons learned from the missions of the Venera program continue to inform spacecraft design and operational strategies in contemporary efforts to explore space. Beyond their scientific and technological importance, the earlier missions also had profound social and political ramifications. During the space race era, these missions symbolized the rivalry between superpowers for dominance in space exploration. For the Soviet Union, achieving success with the Venera missions was about more than scientific discovery. It was also about demonstrating technological prowess and ideological superiority over the United States. The global community closely observed each Venera mission, recognizing their importance in growing humanity's understanding of the solar system. The smooth landing of Venera 7 on Venus in 1970 marked a significant milestone as the first spacecraft to send data from the surface of another planet. This achievement highlighted the Soviet Union's ability to overcome the immense challenges posed by Venus's harsh conditions. In addition to scientific instruments, the Venera spacecraft had cameras that captured the first close-up images of Venus's surface. These images revealed a rugged terrain dominated by rocky plains and volcanic features, providing researchers with useful geological information about the planet's development and history. Panoramic photographs taken by later missions, such as Venera 13 and 14, further enhanced our understanding of Venus's surface morphology and composition. Despite their successes, the Venera missions also ran into their share of failures and difficulties. Some missions either failed to reach Venus or experienced technical issues that made it impossible to transmit data back to Earth. The challenges of operating in Venus's hostile environment, including extreme temperatures exceeding 450 degrees Celsius (842 degrees Fahrenheit) and corrosive sulfuric acid clouds, posed significant engineering obstacles for spacecraft design and operation. Nevertheless, the perseverance and dedication of Soviet scientists and engineers involved in the Venera program paved the way for future missions to Venus and other celestial bodies. As the world's scientific community looks ahead, the renewed interest in Venus signifies a broader recognition of the planet's importance in comparative planetology. Unlike Mars, which has long captured popular imagination, Venus remains a relatively unexplored frontier, yet it may hold the key to understanding why Earth became habitable while its planetary neighbor did not. Modern missions aim to revisit the questions first raised during the Venera era. How did Venus evolve into such a hostile environment? Was it ever Earth-like in the distant past? Could it still harbor microbial life in its upper atmosphere, where conditions are less extreme? These inquiries form the basis of next-generation Venus research. International collaboration is now at the forefront. With space agencies like NASA, Roscosmos, ESA, and ISRO expressing interest in Venus, the era of competitive exploration is giving way to cooperative science. Joint missions, data sharing, and unified research goals are helping scientists pool resources and insights for a more complete picture of Venus. In addition to the 6TY mission, other planned projects include NASA's Veritas and Da Vinci Plus missions, and ESA's Envision orbiter. Together, these missions will deploy cutting-edge instruments to map Venus's surface with unprecedented detail, analyze its atmospheric chemistry, and investigate its geological activity. Some researchers even speculate that Venus may still be volcanically active today, a hypothesis that, if confirmed, would reshape our understanding of planetary evolution and the geological dynamics of rocky planets. Despite the technological advances available today, scientists still face daunting challenges. Venus remains one of the harshest environments in the solar system. Any lander must survive temperatures hot enough to melt lead, pressures equivalent to being 900 meters underwater on Earth, and a corrosive atmosphere dense with sulfuric acid. To overcome these obstacles, engineers are developing next-generation materials, electronics, and thermal shielding. Advances in artificial intelligence and autonomous robotics are also being integrated to ensure landers and orbiters can respond in real time to unexpected conditions, maximizing their scientific return. The enduring legacy of the Venera missions is evident in all these efforts. They proved that even the most hostile corners of the solar system can be reached and studied. They showed that persistence, innovation, and courage could yield scientific breakthroughs once thought impossible. Venus, often overshadowed, is finally taking center stage in planetary exploration once again. As humanity prepares to return to Earth's sister planet with more powerful tools and greater knowledge, we carry forward the pioneering spirit of the scientists and engineers who first dared to land on the brightest star in our night sky, not a star at all, but a world still waiting to reveal its secrets.